I was on the YouTubes yesterday surfing the algorithms, and I came across a video that I didn't know how to process. It was Mexicans rioting in Mexico City, demanding that Americans leave their country under the understanding that they're a drain on the local economy, they need to learn the language, and they're not acculturating to the greater part of Mexico. Where have I heard this before, Jason?
The United States for the last 40 years.
So I looked at my wife and I'm like, I don't even I've been following geopolitics for the greater part of 20 years just as a casual observer. And I've always felt like I have some level of way to wrap my mind around these issues and somehow find something to hold on to. It's like when you're in the subway and it starts to move and you're grabbing for something steady. Like I've always felt like in this geopolitical wave that we're always surfing, I always have something to hold on to. And for the first time, I fell down on the floor of the subway. I have nothing to grab onto. I don't know how to process all this. I feel like maybe this is intentional, like we're being overwhelmed with all of these issues. But I think it's a really interesting story because the irony of it and my wife's observation, and just for people that are just getting to know us, my wife is a naturalized US citizen from Mexico, came to the United States legally at the age of 22, got in line, followed the rules, learned the language, model immigrant story. But let's pull back and look at this story. So I hope Jason's able to roll the video, but what you have are people saying that gringos go home. They're asking for them to self-deport. And the timing of this is very interesting because we're having all of these major ICE raids. If you've been following what's going on in LA, we have a militarized police force on the streets of Los Angeles making widespread arrests. Have you seen these videos, Jason?
Well, I was thinking we should play this Gutfield episode.
Let's do it.
Here, let's go with it.
You will not get a hello if you move to Mexico. Our video of the day comes to us from Mexico City, where rioters looted businesses and harassed tourists in protest of Westerners immigrating to their country and driving up prices. Let's just roll the tape.
Pues el día de hoy estamos luchando contra la gentrificación, es decir, gente que viene de otros países, en su mayoría extranjeros, a querer imponer su cultura, sus precios y desplazar a los mexicanos, a los nativos de estas tierras.
Vengo porque la gentrificación solo es un paso más a la colonización, a los despojos y a que exploten nuestros recursos.
So wait, these agitators are sick of foreigners coming, taking advantage of their system, and refusing to assimilate? The irony levels are off the charts. What's next? Mexicans complaining that our water gave them diarrhea? You know, Kat, I'm always happy when the poop joke actually has some kind of meaning to it. That wasn't just some kind of like ridiculous, off-the-cuff poop joke. That had real substance.
Well, if you're happy, then I'm happy for you.
Thank you. What do you make of this ironic event?
I feel like it wasn't that long ago that we did see who some of these people were. It's the hipster class. It's the white hipsters with the laptops, with the remote jobs who are like, it's so cheap here, I'm moving here. And I am wondering how they are handling it. Because a lot of them are probably like, well, they don't mean me, right?
Yeah.
They're probably like, no, when I go to the coffee shop, I say, hola.
I'm sure they love it when you walk in and you go, oh, things are so cheap in this country.
Yeah. They probably are walking around, hola.
Hola, donde farmacia? Viagra.
I bet some of them are probably will be protesting with them at some point. Oh, exactly. Anything but leaving.
Yes.
They're going to be picking up a sign, yes, lo siento.
You know, Loftus, I bet you've thought about this, because if you move to Mexico, you could probably get a huge cardboard box for the price of a small one here.
Yeah.
Deluxe.
Yeah. You could get like a 3 refrigerator down there.
Yeah. Is that
for like nothing?
Yes.
It's great. I love this. I celebrate the people of Mexico protesting this. This is fantastic. These white Americans going down there and taking the jobs that they don't want. You know, without white people in Mexico, who's going to complain about the service at Starbucks?
In the latest episode of Irony, there's a lot to unpack here. And I want to begin by this dynamic of, yes, we have a lot of baby boomers. San Miguel de Allende and Guanajuato is a very historic town in Mexico. My wife was explaining to me that it's basically all Americans. It's English only. It's essentially an American city in Mexico. And that's all very interesting because I asked her why. And, and I'm asking knowing full well what I think is, but my wife doesn't pay attention to these issues. But she has a unique perspective as a person who's a naturalized U.S. citizen from Mexico. And she's also a woman who carries biblical conservative values. And so I'm like, why do you think Americans are moving to Mexico, like in San Miguel? And she's like, well, it's obvious. They made it in this country. They have discretionary income. They live a better life. There's a better life to have if you have money in Mexico. So they're moving there and they're spending their retirements and their pension years in these sleepy beach towns in Mexico. And this is only growing. I drive into Baja regularly and I see advertisements in English. And this just started popping up like in the last 5 years. And then the reverse is true, right? We have all of these migrants coming in from Mexico, either on temporary visas or they're overstaying or they're coming in this country illegally. And I asked the stupid question, why are Mexicans coming to the United States? Well, the wages are better. The quality of life is better. So I'm just like, my mind's blown. Okay, so can't we all just stay in our own countries? Why is it that Americans feel like it's better that they live in Mexico? And why do Mexicans feel like it's better if they live and work in the United States? Obviously, these are two different groups. One is working class, probably younger, coming from Mexico. The other group is retired class in the United States, upper middle class income moving to Mexico. But it's just weird, right? That we have this dynamic of Mexicans wanting to live in the US and the United States wanting to live in Mexico. But she made an interesting point. We've always had this issue and there was never any backlash. Well, two things. One, you got to look at who's protesting or rioting. I saw a lot of 19-year-old, 20-year-olds with silver-studded leather jackets that looked like the Mexican version of Antifa, is what it looked like. So I would ask an investigative journalist to dig a little bit deeper, maybe go to the coffee shops, maybe go to some of the areas in Mexico City where they're not 19 and punk bands and ask them, how do you feel about the presence of American expatriates in the United States? I don't know what they're going to say, but I have a suspicion that the dynamics that are taking place in Mexico are very similar to the dynamics that we have in the United States, which is young, restless, purposeless youth going to the streets and finding a cause, finding something to rally behind, because young people want purpose. And jump in anytime, Lupo, if you want. But so I just find that interesting that the only people that you see rioting and the ones spray painting in English, go home gringo, learn Spanish, and all these signs are written in Spanish, are predominantly really young people. So and then my wife said something really interesting. She goes, they're not rioting because they're upset that Americans are there. They're rioting as a form of retribution for what's happening in the United States. So there's this feeling that Mexicans in the United States are being targeted unfairly, unjustly for being in the country illegally by federal law enforcement. That there's a growing sentiment among Mexicans in the United States and Mexicans living in Mexico that American federal law enforcement is the enemy of raza. It's the enemy of the Mexican people. And I had to ask my wife the question, stupidly as I always do, well, shouldn't you be deported if you've entered the country illegally? Like, isn't that, like, what else are we supposed to do? And she said, well, absolutely, but it's not being done fairly because you have people on a terror watch list, you have people with criminal records, and interestingly, she said, you have employers who are employing these undocumented illegal workers that are not being punished. What you do have, and these are my words, not hers, is you have red meat for division. You have images surfacing on the internet of brown people speaking Spanish getting arrested by American law enforcement agents in a very violent and a very heavy-handed way. And so I thought about what she was saying, and then she also said something else interesting too. She goes, if they arrest all of the illegals in this country, the United States isn't going to make it till tomorrow, because when you look at who is doing the farm work, who doing a lot of the work that for low wages, it's usually undocumented people, and majority of them are from Mexico. But then I kind of countered that and said, what is the U.S. remittance portion of the Mexican GDP? You know what she found out was she remembers it being 38% 20 years ago. Now it's at 42%. So equally true, if the United States decides, and I think Trump played this card at one point to get the Mexican government to do something. If the United States stops sending money to Mexico tomorrow, Mexico's over tomorrow too. And so I just feel like this is an interesting conversation. Like, the power dynamics, our priorities, immigration, the irony of Americans being asked to leave. Is this because Mexicans feel attacked? What are your thoughts?
Well, if you recall back to the first Trump administration and the first Trump run, right? He said Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Well, what happened? Because this wasn't really made clear to the American public. When Trump shut down the southern border, all the caravans that were coming through and all of the people seeking asylum that were coming through were forced to wait in Mexico.
Yes.
Well, that caused great deals of problems for Mexico.
Yes, it did.
So what did Mexico do? Mexico secured their southern border.
Yes, they did.
And so was Trump right? In a way, he was.
He was absolutely.
He said, look, you guys have number one, the United States has been complacent for 50 years, 50 plus years, and allowing illegals into this country and not processing them, right? And I think that's, Trump mentioned not too long ago, talking about giving citizenship to workers that are vouched for by the farmers. Now, I can see some problems with that, because now you end up with almost a form of slavery. A farm owner could hold that over a immigrant's head that says, if you don't work harder, I'm going to tell the Trump administration to deport you.
It's happening in the potato farms in Center, Colorado. I know a personal story, but please continue.
So that is kind of an issue, but at the same time, they can look at these guys that have been law-abiding citizens, other than the fact that they're here illegally, law-abiding citizens that have been here for a long time, that work hard, give them citizenship, force them to pay taxes. Now they're also now forced to make minimum wage. You can't pay them under the table anymore.
Halfway to
But
citizenship.
at the same point, now they're paying their fair share. Like, let's correct some of these issues. Obviously, we can't just deport every illegal immigrant on the face of the earth. I don't believe that's possible. But there's issues that required the government in Mexico to step up and do their job. And one of the big economic trade deals with Mexico involved Mexico cracking down on the drug cartels.
Right.
That they've been complacent in allowing the drug cartels to roam freely in this country and to do whatever they wanted for so long, that's impacted the American population. And so there's a give and a take, and I think that's what so many people on the left and in media fail to recognize, is the fact that Mexico has to step up their game at the same point. And so, yeah, I mean, you see guys that are pissed off and they're rallying against Americans in Mexico. But this is a new thing in Mexico, Americans moving to Mexico. This has been happening in America for 50 plus years. So, the same goes with those that want to move to Canada. All the leftists that want to move to Canada. Go move to Canada, right? See how great it is. But don't come back.
Yeah, I think it's a interesting conversation, and the part that also I haven't brought up yet is my wife said that a lot of illegals were baited into the country with the promise of free goodies. So there's some responsibility at the feet of our illustrious politicians at the swamp, also known as Washington, D.C. When you offer free healthcare, free Visa cards, and stays at Michelin-rated 5-star hotels, and your country, and I'm thinking of El Salvador and countries in Central America that have been marred with civil war and violence for decades, that sounds pretty darn tempting, especially if I'm a father and I have kids, and if I was in the feet of an El Salvadorian dad you better believe I'm seriously considering taking the offer.
Yeah, I mean, under the Biden administration, you got a phone. The Obama administration, you ended up with cash when you walk through the
Chuck E. Cheese.
it's like, here you go. Here's everything.
Yeah.
Right, more than what Americans were getting. While we have Americans that are living homeless and veterans that are living homeless, we're just like giving whatever we want to the illegal immigrants that are coming through the southern border, and just being allowed to come through the southern border. I mean, what Obama and Biden did in the process of this illegal immigration is beyond criminal, and nobody's being held accountable for it because they allowed this to take place. They purposefully ignored U.S. law, and they did it without congressional approval.
And I want to expose something that I'm concerned, and I hope I'm wrong on this, Jason, but I'm beginning to think that we're being propagandized into a, call it brown versus white, call it Hispanic versus Anglo-American division in this country. I'm looking at like Gutfield, he wouldn't have been able. I thought the jokes were hilarious, but let's be honest, in the world of liberal PC, he would not have been able to make those jokes even 2 years ago. It would have been condemned. And thankfully we're kind of recorrecting, but it speaks to, I think, a division that's taking place. And I feel I have a unique perspective because I have family and friends clearly on what, if you want to call them sides, people that consume predominantly Spanish language media, that predominantly associate, either live in Mexico or only associate with Hispanic communities in the United States, and then of course very much embedded in the mainstream American experience and in communities. And I'm looking at division that's taking place because what I'm hearing on, let's call it the right, let's call it, mainstream American conservatism, where they're saying, look at what's happening in Mexico, how funny, the irony of this. You've been doing this to us, like you said, Jason, like 50 years. This is a recent phenomenon in Mexico. I see that as a point of division. I also see a point in division when these videos are surfacing of people getting arrested, slammed to the ground, and I'm looking at my friends on the right and my MAGA friends and my, pro-Trump friends, and they're saying, good, that's what I voted for, and we're enforcing the law, great. And then I'm also hearing people, let's call it the left, and it's not really politically left, but the other side of the argument, saying this is not the correct priority, this is not the correct procedure, there's fear in our communities, we don't have transparency, this is overhandedness, we shouldn't have militarized police force in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles looking like they're sieging Baghdad in 2003.
So I think that there's some important things to note. Number one is the fact that if you were to try to gain citizenship of another country, anywhere else in the world, other than the United States, there's a process, and you have to follow the process. And if you don't follow the process, you're going to be removed and probably thrown in jail, depending upon where you go.
Sure.
The United States pays every single county pretty much in America has ESL. English is a second language. It's taught. Anybody could take it. It's publicly
My
funded.
ex-girlfriend's nickname was ESL.
And so my question becomes, right, is there a Spanish as a second language? Is there SSL classes in Mexico
No.
offered to the Americans?
No.
Like, we have done everything in the United States to even allow for these immigrants that are coming across the border to adapt to American culture.
Absolutely.
And that's not being done in Mexico, but yet they're pissed that they don't learn the language. And we've been saying that for years.
And everything you're saying is true. I what I'm speaking to, and again, I'm not taking sides. I'm making observations, and I'm still trying to reconcile everything. But I'm sensing that there's a point of division that's being nurtured. We have to understand the modus operandi of our conquerors and our enemy. It's a divide and conquer stratagem. They want to come in and they want to divide us along racial lines, along political lines. And I'm just warning the church, because blessed are the peacemakers. We need to be vigilant against any threat of dividing the church. We're one body of Christ, and we're all in this, at least in this country, Americans, and we need to maintain those ideals and not fall for the trap of the enemy, which is division. And I hope that this isn't happening place. I hope that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill and I'm looking too much into this. And I'm saying this because I very well may be, but there's just this little tickling in my ear saying that there's seeds being planted for division and the harvest will not be good.
100%. There's definitely division going on across the globe, across the United States at the present moment, and the division keeps getting worse. Well, this is Spiritual Insurgency. Join us every day. God bless.
Peace.